Ladies and gentlemen, the version of Paul George that we believed was coming to Philadelphia has finally arrived. The $52 million man has earned every cent of what is on that paycheck, leading the Sixers to a victory over the Hornets, the third victory against the Charlotte Hornets, and playing up to the version of himself that we believed would be here all along. Me and Ryan are going to dive into why this is a little bit more than just your average Monday night victory against the Charlotte Hornets and why this meant something to the Sixers team. Ultimately, the game being a 121-108 victory. Very clearly, Paul George and Tyrese Maxey setting the tone early on and leading this team to a victory throughout. So in the first quarter alone, the Sixers team finished with 31 points. Paul George and Maxey by themselves combined for 27 of those. They became the first Sixers teammates in history to combine for scoring as many points as they did. The first Sixers duo to score 20 points in a half this season, and to add to that a little bit further, it is the season high, the Sixers career high for Paul George tonight with his 30-plus point performance there. So Ryan, to throw it to you right off the bat here, what are your initial takeaways, and how did it feel to see Paul George looking like that?
My initial takeaway is let's play the Hornets every night.
Yeah.
8 wins on the year. Three of them are against Charlotte, and then we get the opportunity to play them again this week. So hopefully to move to 4-0. But I thought coming into this game, my mindset was like, all right, I want to see where this team is at effort-wise, mentality-wise. Because
Yep.
after Friday night, two major injuries yet again. McCain, I'd be surprised if we see him again this year. Joel Embiid, I'd be surprised if we saw him before it was 2025. When you look at that, two major injuries like that, what kind of effort does this team come out with? And they come out and they respond and they play well. And Paul George and Tyrese Maxey kind of shoulder the load in this one, combined for 73 points. And that's going to be more of the same going forward, I think, if this team's going to be winning basketball games. Those guys got to step up. They got to earn those max contracts, play like those max contract players they are, and carry this team throughout this time where Joel is probably going to miss at least another couple weeks or so. So 73 points combined for the two of them. Certainly a bright spot and a step in the right direction. And once again, you're just kind of digging yourself out of where we've been these past couple weeks into the season.
Yeah, 100% there, and obviously plenty more work still to be done. To take a peek at the standings there, and this updating without the victories. So the Sixers sitting at 8-16 on the season, have moved up a half game from what this shows on the screen right here, but very much in the same mix. And you kind of touched on it there, and also did a nice job breaking it down in the previous video with the injury updates, which you guys can check out on the channel. But this really is a defining stretch for the Sixers team. What kind of fight do they have? What sort of motivation? And we mentioned, kind of speaking about what complicates this overall decision-making and outlook from here, it is that draft pick is top 6 protected. And that puts you in a difficult spot as an organization, because if we want to look at this honestly here, even as bad as the Sixers team has been, they're not going to be worse than the Utah Jazz, the New Orleans Pelicans, or the Toronto Raptors, or the Washington Wizards, the teams that are out there directly trying to lose. And we're seeing that there is a pulse in this Sixers team. You paid Paul George this amount of money for a reason, and finally that was the guy that showed up. And these stats being before tonight as well, but 15.9 points per game on the season, 5.3 rebounds, 4.9 assists, shooting just 31.7% from three. Did connect on 6 of his 9 3-point attempts per game tonight, or in the game tonight. So good to see that. And Tyrese Maxey, I think the conversation is slightly different to me. That for his output for the season, we are still talking 24.2 points per game, 5 assists, 3.6 rebounds. I think he's been playing fine basketball, just missing some shots that he typically doesn't. That 30.3%. A percentage from beyond the arc is not the norm for a guy who has finished top 5 in the NBA in three-point percentage in 2 separate seasons in his career. That is who we know Tyrese Maxey to be. But to bring it back to Paul George here, we did see this guy taking things on a little more. And what I was really looking forward to with the Paul George signing is when you look back through his career and just about every season, there tends to be this stretch, this kind of 20-ish game stretch, sometimes a little shorter, 10 to 15, where he looks like one of the best players on the planet. A guy borderline in that MVP caliber of play. I don't know how much of that he has left in the tank, but we saw kind of that aggressive version of him that I wanted to see tonight. First game that we saw from him without that bulky knee brace, and he spoke a little bit about it post-game as we were preparing for this. I had on in the background, speaking about the mentality that comes with it, feeling like he's moving a little freer out there, and those are all great things to see there. So what's your level of optimism that this is the Paul George, the version of Paul George that is here to stay, or is this still a game-by-game kind of mindset for you?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at it through the lens of like I just want to see him be more consistent. Like
Yeah.
tonight, a great performance and shows the aggressiveness as well, and goes out there and plays, I believe, a season high with 40 minutes tonight.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a season high in minutes and a season high in points. I mean, those two kind of go hand in hand there, but 33 points and 8 assists as well. We've talked about a couple of times where I'm more and more impressed by his playmaking. He had that one nice behind the back pass late in the fourth quarter to Kelly Oubre, and he knocked down a three-pointer. But I'm just kind of looking at that I need to see a more consistent Paul George. I don't need 33 and 8 every night,
Yeah.
but I do need 24 and 6 probably going forward. Like he can have performances like he did on Friday night where 15 points. The performance before against the Bulls, he only had 12 points. And then you look at the Orlando game before that, 21, and the Hornets game before that, 29. Like a little bit too much up and down, too much some really good stuff, too much some really underachieving things. We need a more consistent kind of happy medium, I think, going forward with him. But I do believe too the shedding of the knee brace is going to be a positive for him going forward. It's just something not on your mind. Like
Yeah.
that's something that always is kind of there restricting you. You feel like hopefully going forward we see more of this, but I just need Paul George to be a more consistent night in, night out type of guy going forward.
Yeah, and obviously the injury prevention's the biggest storyline with the brace there, but there is a mental component that comes with it that is kind of a reminder of the injury that you're dealing with. That this
Yep.
isn't you playing the free version of yourself. There is that constant, thinking that it's on you or weighing you down or whatever the case may be. And it was nice to see him fully break free of this. Now, to kind of reflect on the lottery conversation one more time before we move on here, did want to pull up the exact numbers and shout out to Sixers Adam for giving the breakdown here. As we know with the lottery system, there are no guarantees when you get down there. And this is for the very reason that the NBA is trying to prevent for these teams bottoming out in the way that we see every year, and really it happens across all leagues. But to give the full breakdown of the percentages, this is the percent that they will keep their pick. So if they end up with one of the two worst records in the NBA, which I just don't see a world where it gets to that, they would have a 100% chance of keeping their pick. And you can kind of see the tiered percentages of how this goes down right here. And I think the honest reality check that we have to have with ourselves is we got to lose that conversation. That I don't see a world in which Daryl Morey himself views their percentage of actually making some noise in the playoffs as less than the chances of getting in that top 6 pick. Now, whether or not that's a fair outlook is a different conversation, but I do think he is very clearly an analytical mind who dives into, your mathematical percentages of what you can do. And when really look around the Eastern Conference, I still feel kind of the same way. That the Boston Celtics are obviously the gold standard, the defending champions, and have played every bit of that this season. The Cleveland Cavaliers, I certainly am taking more seriously than I was at the start of the season, but there's not that many more dangerous teams here. This New York Knicks team, I think, has played well above their head, but I still have some concerns about them from a playoff perspective, and that's a deeper conversation to have at another time. The point being here that all these Sixers issues have been internal, that they have to fix that within themselves, and the Joel Embiid conversation will be interesting. We're going to continue to see the Sixers drag this out. At this current time, we got an update that he will miss at least a week and be reevaluated. Frankly, I think this is going to be something that has continued to be drug out and that they do not give a clear timeline, but he continues to miss. But do you agree with my assessment here that I think the talks of this being a bottoming out tanking team simply have to evaporate because there is too much talent here compared to the bottom feeders in the NBA?
Yeah, I would say so unless you suffer, knock on wood, but someone suffers like Paul George or Tyrese
Maxey.
Maxey, a season-ending type of injury where, okay, then it's really just Paul George out there with a bunch of role players or
Yeah.
Tyrese Maxey with a bunch of role players. I think there's still too much talent on the team to, like you said, guarantee one of those bottom two records in the league because you're going to have matchups against the Wizards. You have this next matchup against the Hornets. Like teams like that where especially as the season goes on. You get teams that are in kind of full on quit mode where
Yeah.
this Sixers team, I think I outlined it in the last video. I think they're going to be bouncing back and forth between that 7 spot and like that 11 to 12, where you're going to have a few teams there kind of with the Pistons, Sixers, and above. I think those are your teams probably going to be competing in the mix for playoff spots. Hornets, Raptors, Wizards probably going to be your cellar dwellers, and then we don't. I don't know the West from top to bottom right now, but I assume the Sixers are going to be above 2 to 3 teams in that regard too. So there's going to be too many wins to guarantee and feel safe that you're going to get one of those two worst records. But I also think the Embiid situation is a interesting one to monitor because if he's healthy and if he is playing well, then maybe you do go out at the deadline and give up some assets. But I think as of right now, you can't be giving up anything to help you win now this year because if the ultimate goal is a title, I don't think anything on this team that you would acquire at the deadline is pushing you any closer to that over a team like the Celtics.
Yeah, and in typical Sixers fashion tonight, it felt like this game was in hand. The lead built up to 21, and then there is that burst of energy from this Hornets team to kind of make it a game again a little bit midway through that fourth quarter. Ultimately, the Sixers were able to extend that here. But I will say, from an overall perspective, this was a victory that made me feel better about the direction of the Sixers team. That we have to see Tyrese Maxey and Paul George being that kind of buoy to keep this team afloat until the pieces come together. And we've kind of had this big picture discussion about Joel Embiid. Can he be a guy that leads a team on a championship run? I personally view it that, like, I don't believe the best player always needs to be the leader. But what I do believe in this situation, this Sixers team needs to find its identity from both an on and off court standpoint for who they are. And then Embiid needs to fit directly into that. I get it's a huge piece of the puzzle. That's kind of a difficult thing to, thread the needle on that. But that's kind of the vibe that I see for how this builds. If the Sixers team can get on track and then add Embiid to that piece here, we're starting to talk about a potential formula for that, leading to a little bit deeper success and then being viewed a little more seriously. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, I agree there too. And it goes back to what you kind of been saying all offseason, all beginning of the season, where the goal is just to get to the playoffs and have a chance
Yeah.
with a healthy Embiid. And once again, all you got to do is just get in and find yourself there and, take your chances. As long as you avoid the ace spot, I think if you have a healthy Embiid, knock on wood, and Maxey and George play like they did tonight, take your chances against the Bucks, the Knicks, whoever that 2 seed could potentially be, the Cavs, even as well. As long as you avoid that 1-8 game, and there you go, a potential matchup there in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Celtics. Cross that bridge when you get to it. But I think that's kind of how you got to look at it, where as long as they stay kind of afloat here until Embiid comes back, as I said, like over the next 7 games, if we get to New Year's and they go 1-6 or 2-5, they already won tonight's game, then it becomes more in the conversation of, all right, is it right to kind of just shut it down and completely punt here and go for that worst record potentially? They got to find a way to at least go 500 over these next 7 games before 2025.
Yeah, 100% there. My last kind of thoughts on that as a whole is the outlook does not get better next year if you shut things down. Joel Embiid a year older, Paul George a year older, you not gaining a significant draft pick here. This was an all-in season. So I get the train has gotten off the tracks much quicker than we expected to be the case this year. But the reality is you can only dig yourself out of this hole one game at a time, and that is what the Sixers did tonight. So took care of business against the Hornets. That will be their next matchup as well. Hopefully the same result, but we will be with this team from start to finish. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Was this a victory that you feel a little bit better about this Sixers team? Shout out to Paul George for finally showing up as the version of himself that we've been hoping for all along, and I do believe there is more of that to come. I think there is something to him getting more healthy, him feeling a little bit more confident with himself within his own body, and that's kind of what I expect moving forward. So we will see how things shake out from here, but once again, appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning in. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video. Me and Ryan will be back talking with you next time. Peace.